What's up, everyone? You are listening to the very first episode of Pod Sooie. We're so glad you're here. My name is Jackson Fuller, and I'm joined by Andrew Hutchinson, and this is our brand new podcast covering the Arkansas Razorbacks. We wanted to get this rolling right as 2024 begins, and aside from this first episode, we plan to publish a new podcast every Monday. There might be a couple midweek episodes filtered in, depending on what's going on with the Hogs. And we've got a lot to touch on today with the SEC basketball season starting this weekend. The Hogs host Auburn and the football transfer portal in full swing. But first, I think some introductions are in order. Hutch, you might not need an introduction yourself, but tell the listeners a little bit about you and, lay it all out there for everybody.
Yeah, as Jackson said, I'm Andrew Hutchinson. I've been covering the Hogs for a little over a decade now, which is kind of crazy to say. Dating back to my time with the Arkansas Traveler, I've been a little bit everywhere, but right now you can find my stuff at Best of Arkansas Sports. We cover mainly the three main sports, football, basketball, baseball, but we every once in a while touch on something else. But the great thing about this site, I like to tell people, is it's 100% free, no paywall, so go check it out. We try to provide a little bit more in-depth analysis, more than just the news itself. But yeah, it's been covering the Hogs for about, I guess, I'm trying to think, about 11, 12 years now. I think this was my 11th season covering the 11th football season. So been having a blast, and I'm excited to get going on another podcast.
Have you been having a blast over the 11 years? It's as an outsider, I'll give my little intro from. Originally from North Carolina, been covering high schools over there for a long time before a little year break, and now here in Arkansas covering the Hogs for, compared to Andrew's 11 years, I've been on the beat for about 5 months now, but really, really enjoying Northwest Arkansas and Fayetteville. I know the football season was not what anyone here wanted, but it was fun to get to follow the SEC for the first time. And yeah, I cover Arkansas for the Southwest Times Record, which is a newspaper based out of Fort Smith and owned by USA Today. So you can find all my stuff at swtimes.com. Unlike Hutch, not everything's free, but most of our stuff is free online. But we'd really appreciate a subscription if you feel so inclined and like this podcast enough. Would mean the best. But maybe we can get there after a few episodes down the road. So without further ado, Hutch, let's dive into our first episode of Pod Sooie. All right, Hutch, I don't really think there's anywhere else we can start this first episode than a discussion about Keon Menafield Jr. Let's get into the Arkansas basketball team. Not a great start to the year. Vibes were down coming into, especially after the Oklahoma game. But they've kind of looked like a completely different team over the past three halves of basketball, with Menafield essentially running the show as the Arkansas point guard. They're playing a lot faster. The offense is better, and he gives them another really good defensive guard. So are you buying this, resurgence that the Arkansas basketball team's had recently? Do you feel like he maybe was the missing piece that Musselman kind of needed?
They definitely needed a point guard, and I think they found one in Menafield. Now, I would like to see it against a better team, like Auburn coming up, the top 25 team that's pretty good in SEC play. But this guy is someone who produced in the Pac-12 last year at Washington, so it's not like it's going to be a complete shock to him that this step up in competition. And yeah, I mean, I think he's they look smoother. They look like a more aesthetically pleasing team, especially over, as you said, the last three halves of basketball. So the pace is better. They've scored a lot more points than they were. I mean, that first half of the previous game was just atrocious. I can't even remember who it was against. I've tried to completely black that game out of my memory. But the Wilmington game was first half and second half. It looked very, very much more like what you would expect out of an Eric Musselman team. Maybe not quite the level of defense you'd expect, but again, the kind of the style of the game kind of dictated the way it went, and they won by 16, so can't really complain too much.
Yeah, I think that was the Abilene Christian game where they look terrible in the first half. He starts the second half, and they come back for, I think, a double-digit win, but they look so good. And I think the thing that's impressed me the most about Menafield is, like, to have, obviously, he didn't play the first half of the majority of the non-conference season, got the waiver from the NCAA, and he's already got Musselman's trust. I mean, he's averaging close to 30 minutes a game in his 3 games. He played the entire second half of that Abilene Christian game in just his second game. And clearly, I think, and you could tell from Muss in his press conference, like he maybe felt like they kind of needed Keon this season. Like they needed a consistent point guard who could, break down a defense and get inside. I think that's that's the one thing I think he's turned around with this team is they actually have dribble penetration that's not battle KB, because when KB drives, that takes your best shooter outside of the inside the paint and outside the 3-point line. If you can if those two can mesh well and KB can kind of stretch the floor and allow Keon to get into the paint and stuff, I think they've got a shot at really turning this around. But like you said, there's much stiffer competition right around the corner with Auburn. Like I said, things were looking bleak coming out of the Oklahoma game. Just how much optimism do you have now that SEC play is here? And I guess we can kind of talk about the Auburn game, but what's your level of optimism that we're going to get another Eric Musselman turnaround with this team?
I think it's because of Minifield. It's more than it was before Minifield kind of emerged. I was like, I don't know if this team's going to make the NCAA tournament. I mean, their net ranking still has a lot of work to do. I mean, I think it is in the 90s right now. I haven't checked it this morning, but I think it was like 92 after the win over Wilmington. So I mean, it's still a lot of work to do, and there's still the SEC play is going to be tough. I think I wrote that. I want to say it's like 10 of the 18 SEC games are against quad one opportunities. So that's good in that you have opportunities to improve your resume, but it's also not good because it's really tough competition. So I do have some optimism. Eric Musselman being the head coach is my main reason behind that optimism, because I think he is just he really knows basketball, and he's proven the last 3 years that he can turn around a team. Even his first year here, they had a really rough spot, and they were in position to potentially make a run in the SEC tournament, had COVID not happened. So I've been very impressed with Eric Musselman, his ability to do those type of turnarounds. And with Minifield being in the mix, it's not like it's just the same team that was horrible against Oklahoma and those other games. It's a new team, as we were talking about, with Minifield, and I think that's why they have a shot. I'm not ready to put money on it, but I think they have a shot to make the NCAA tournament. And once you're in the dance, anything can happen.
Yeah, just checked. They're 86th in the net rankings as of we're recording this on Wednesday morning. So, but even with a loss to Auburn this week, they're probably going to go up, I would imagine, just with the competition level. I mean, maybe I'm not going to pretend to understand how the net rankings work, but I think I'm with you where there's some optimism, but there's a lot of guys on this team that need to play a lot better. It's not just like, oh, Menifield's here, that's like the missing piece. The other pieces, and we saw some of that in the UNCW game. Devo finally made some threes, got the offense going. Trevon Brazil attacked the basket. I think he made his first 3-pointer since injuring his ankle against. I think that was the game before Oklahoma, but. They've got a really talented team, but guys just have to be more consistent night to night. Khalif Battle, I think he's like one of my favorite players on this team just because of the type of offensive juice that he can provide on a team that hasn't really been great offensively until Menifield joined the team. But even he is pretty inconsistent on a night to night basis, or even a half to half basis. There's halves where he misses 8 shots, then comes back out and makes his first 3 threes in the second half. So there's still a lot of improvement that needs to be done, and there's not much time to do it. But they're definitely taking steps in the right direction. Do you think I sent a tweet about this out a couple of weeks ago when things were really not looking so good. Do you think we maybe overrated just this team and what our expectations were before the season, kind of based off the NCAA tournament run last year? I mean, they really have struggled against ranked teams, against the SEC now, I guess going back only to last year. But the expectations were astronomical coming into the season. I know they were only ranked 14th, but there was inside the program, and I think around the SEC, a lot of people thought that they were the SEC favorite. What do you think about just how we kind of, now that we've got non-conference season behind us, how we thought the season would go and how it's played out so far?
Yeah, heck, I think a national analyst, maybe John Fanta, I think that's his first name, Fanta predicted Arkansas to win the national championship before the season. And that's a guy that has no connection to the Razorbacks at all. And there were several other analysts that were predicting them to go to the Final Four. And looking back, that probably was a little too steep of expectations. But I think that's just a product of what they've done in these recent years. I mean, the 3 straight Sweet 16s, a couple of trips to the Elite Eight. They've been right there. And Eric Musselman is still here. The guys they brought in were all pretty heralded recruits. The transfers, that is. And Layden Blocker was a high 4-star. Bay Fall was a high 4-star. We haven't seen much of him at all, but there was reasons for high expectations. I think everyone just assumed like, oh, this is just going to keep going, and that's not always how it works. Every team's a little bit different. It's just so hard to know. I mean, how would we know? Because we haven't been in practice. We haven't seen what the practices look like, and of course, according to Eric Musselman, they practice great. They just can't translate it to games for whatever reason. Very, very odd kind of type of situation. So, I mean, I think maybe the expectations were a little bit too high, but that's just a product of the success they've already had the last few years.
So I got a follow up to that. Maybe you can enlighten me as the new guy here on the beat. It seemed like this year that when Arkansas was at its low points, when they were really struggling, I got a sense of surprise from Musselman. Genuine, he didn't expect these kinds of struggles. Did that happen maybe last year or the years prior when they have had some lulls, or what did it seem like he, was he maybe just playing it up and oh, I'm out of answers, this team might not be the one, or was that maybe a little different vibe from Musselman this season when the team was struggling?
I feel like it's different in that most of the struggles that they've hit have been due to injury. Last year, the Nick Smith situation, in, out, Brazil going down with his torn ACL, and Eric Musselman, almost every press conference would be like, well, when you lose a guy like TB and then you lose a guy like Nick Smith, every team in America would struggle like that. And so he kind of pinned it on the injuries. And I think there, even back to his first year, there was a stretch where Isaiah Joe got hurt and missed 5 straight games. They lost all of them. And it was like, okay, well, it was an injury. And I think there was a stretch where Justin Smith, his year, he got hurt. And there was, usually there was a reason behind the struggles. And it was a simple fix as a guy being added to the mix. So it's kind of like Keon Minifield added. He wasn't injured, but him entering the mix, I think maybe makes it similar to the previous situations. But I think before his return and before they knew he was going to be able to be eligible, I think Muss was genuinely baffled as to what was going on, especially if what he's saying about the practice habits and everything of the team is true. Then that's you can't even pin it on, well, this team's got to learn how to practice better. This team's got to learn how to play for Eric Musselman, because he's always talked about the adjustments guys have to make from, the schools they were at to Eric Musselman's system. So I don't know if it's, to me, it was a little bit different. But it is a little bit similar in that, they did get a guy back, and now I think Eric Musselman's a little bit more comfortable.
Yeah. One thing that Muss has shown over the past few years is all they got to do is get into the tournament to make a run. So I think that's one thing I'm going to keep in the back of my mind just as we go through SEC season. It's okay, I'd love to see them, go win 12, 13, 14 games in the SEC, and maybe that they might have to make the tournament. But I think as long as they make it, I think the Arkansas fans can take some solace in the fact that they, they'll have a chance to win at least a couple games. It's interesting what you say about the injuries and stuff like that, and how well Arkansas has practiced this season, according to Musselman. And part of me wonders with this team, and I guess maybe we're going down a little doom and gloom route here, but that's how the non-conference has felt for a while this season. Did he get too many players in the transfer portal this year? Are there just too many personalities, too many guys that are probably deserving of minutes, but they all can't get minutes? They all can't get their shots up. And I mean, I mean, there was one home game. I can't really remember what it was. And I felt like the team like the guys on the floor were scared to make a mistake because of that quick hook that Musselman has. And it's not unique to Musselman. A lot of college coaches will have that quick hook. You make a mistake, come sit down. It might be a quick sit and you're back on the floor after you get a little talking to, but it really felt like for a while there that there was just too many mouths to feed and Musselman didn't know what the right rotation is. But it seems like he's settled on, Menafield, Devo, Tremont Mark are going to be his core moving forward. And then KB is kind of he's hot, he's cold, he's going to be a part of the group because he can get so hot. The biggest X factor for me moving into conference season is Trevon Brazile. What have you made of his play so far? Because there were such high expectations. I know he's coming off a torn ACL, but I think there's still a lot of room to grow there. And if he does grow, that's going to be a really good thing for Arkansas.
I would really like to see TB kind of develop a mean streak, like a killer instinct kind of. A lot of people said the same thing about Moses Moody when he was here. Like, if he had that killer instinct mentality, Moses Moody would average 25 points and been National Player of the Year probably. That's just kind of not his personality. But TB, you see streaks, moments and flashes of it. Like, I remember an exact moment in the UNC Wilmington game where he kind of got tangled up with a Wilmington guys. They were kind of going down the floor. And then the next trip back down when they were on offense, he got the ball and drove it to the basket and scored over him. Like, I mean, you could tell it really pissed him off. And I'm like, man, if he could just play pissed off all the time, but within himself, he doesn't need to go out there and get a bunch of technicals, which we've seen him do quite a bit this year. If he could just kind of bottle that up and use that, then I think he could be the first-round draft pick that we all expected him to be. And he could still very well be. I think I saw an ESPN ranking earlier this week that said he was still a top 20 draft prospect, despite his inconsistencies and struggles this year, which is just crazy. That just tells you the potential he has. So I think he is the X factor, as you said, and if they could get him going, then watch out, because if you got him and you got Menafield, and you got Devo still being Devo, if he can start knocking down shots like he did and playing great defense, then you've got the makings of a team that, as you said, could make a decent run in the SEC and get in the NCAA tournament and do some damage.
Yeah, I mean, you nailed it with that aggression that he needs to have. There's too many times this year where he drives to the hoop and then kind of falls back when he's attempting a shot or a layup. He's such a tremendous athlete, and you see the flashes, and I genuinely do think, Menafield's here, Devo's been here for 4 years now. Tremont Mark has all the big game experience in the world from his time at Houston. Trevon Brazile is the most talented guy on that team at the end of the day. The things that being able to shoot with his athleticism and size, but we just need to see it more. And I will say, I did not love what Eric Musselman said in his press conference after the UNC Wilmington game about TB not wanting to play center, because that kind of, I know he probably isn't a center, especially when he gets to the NBA, he's going to be a stretch four, and that's his best role here. But to me, that shows he doesn't really embrace that physical aspect of the game. And you can see it when he drives to the basket, when he's taking his jumpers and not getting to the hoop. But there's still so much potential there. And I'm just hoping this Arkansas team has kind of been gearing up for this, for the conference season. But I don't know. It hasn't felt that way from hearing Muss. They've had a lot to work on, and not really been. I don't think they've had the luxury of maybe waiting for the conference season to unfold. What do you think about? What do you think about this team over the next few months? Do you we already talked about our optimism or pessimism level. Do you think they make the tournament? Do you think they make the NCAA tournament? And I know I'm not gonna have a punishment for you if you're wrong. We're not gonna hold you to it. You can change this prediction every week if you want. I'll give my prediction, but do you think they make the NCAA tournament this year?
I think right now, before the start of SEC play, I'm still going to give Eric Musselman the benefit of the doubt. Getting Menafield back, I think they're going to figure it out. I think they're going to make the NCAA tournament. They may be sweating it out. They may be one of the last four in and have to play in those, Dayton games or something. But I do think that they are capable of doing that. They're gonna have to take care of business at Bud Walton Arena, and they're gonna have to win the games that are winnable on the road. And they've given themselves very little wiggle room with the net situation right now. So they're gonna have to get in it. They can't have any slumps like we've seen in SEC play before. So I think they are, but ask me again in a couple of weeks after we see them play Auburn and some other SEC games, and I may have a different opinion.
I'm right there with you. I think they are, but I will say these next 3 games, even before the Texas A&M game, and Texas A&M Tuesday, January 16th, they were one of the preseason favorites in the SEC. Before we get to that point, we'll release an episode the Monday before that game. I'm going to feel pretty confident whether they're going to make the tournament or not, because you just said they got to protect Bud Walton Arena and they got to go win a couple of those winnable road games. Well, you open up SEC play at home against number 25 Auburn. You got to win that game. And then your next 2 are at Georgia and at Florida. And those are winnable road SEC games. They've got to start 2-1. It cannot be 1-2. I don't really care how they get there. I think I'd prefer them, get that Auburn win, get that quad 1 victory on the resume, and maybe you can drop one of those road games. But if they're 1-2 heading to Texas A&M, I just don't see it. Like those are 3 games that you can't lose 2 of them right off the bat in SEC play. And who knows? Of course, maybe they turn it around. But based off what we've seen so far, I'm putting a lot of stock into this opening 3-game stretch, especially because, like you said, the winnable road games is really going to be the difference, I think, for this team, because I have confidence that they can protect Bud Walton Arena.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, Auburn being a ranked team, it's always a big environment. Our Arkansas fans have strong opinions about Bruce Pearl, so I think it'll be a fired up environment. Those road games, the trip to Florida kind of is tricky. Gainesville has been not kind to Arkansas over the years, even to good Arkansas teams. But again, this is not the best Florida team in the world, so yeah, that should be a winnable game. Georgia should be winnable, as you said. I think 2-1 is absolutely vital. It's not the absolute, I'm not ready to completely hit the panic button if they go 1-2, but I really think they got to beat Auburn. They got to split those 2 road games and have a good showing against Texas A&M, as you said. And then we'll see, but it's tough.
Yeah. I will be fully hitting the panic button. Just if they go 1-2, I'm going to Staples. I'm getting the red panic, this red Staples button, writing panic on it, and smashing it, because I think you're right. The Florida game is tricky. That's never an easy place to play. They got to beat Georgia on the road. They got to. All right, I think that's good for basketball talk right now. It's been a little while since we had the UNC Wilmington game. I'm still coping over it. That's where I went to school, and was mildly, unbiasedly hoping for an upset maybe there, but that's okay. I can put the loss behind me. Let's move on to the football team, the transfer portal. We all know 2023 was a major disappointment, and while Sam Pitman is staying, there were always going to be massive changes across the program headed into 2024. KJ and Rocket say goodbye. Bobby Petrino comes in. He snags a quarterback out of the portal in Taylon Green from Boise State. And just as recently as last week, wide receivers coach Kenny Guyton bolted Fayetteville for the University of Wisconsin. Of course, Guyton was the interim offensive coordinator when Arkansas fired Dan Enos. I'm not really surprised that ended up happening. You rarely ever see a guy get promoted, then get demoted and stay. But overall, Hutch, how are you feeling so far about the Arkansas offseason? I mean, there's a lot of offseason left to go, and while the transfer portal is closed for people entering their names in it, you're still going to see a lot of movement with the guys that are still in the portal. What has Arkansas done right, and what do they still need to do?
They've gotten some nice pieces. I think Taylon Green out of the portal is solid, especially with that being Bobby Petrino's kind of handpicked guy. I know Bobby Petrino's kind of a hot button topic for some people. People feel different ways about him. Arkansas fans generally are very, very, very optimistic when it comes to him because they remember how it was in 2010, 2011. And they think, hey, if this is a guy that Bobby Petrino likes as a quarterback, then, hey, we should like him too because he had such a a good track record, with Ryan Mallett and Tyler Wilson, and he even recruited Brandon Allen, who ended up having a lot of success after he left. So I think that lends to some optimism. I still think that they need to do a better job finishing out this portal class. They've raided the Mountain West, which I don't know if that's a great thing if you're an SEC school. I mean, maybe Taylon Green, as I said, being a handpicked guy, but you're getting a left tackle out of San Jose State and Fernando Carmona. I think he's got the potential to be good, but he could also really struggle with the transition to the SEC. You've also, the kicker, I think is what you really needed with Cam Little moving on in the SEC. I think that may be the most underrated transfer portal addition so far, just because he's a kicker. They don't get much publicity, but he's had a really productive career there. And it's not like, a lot of Mountain West kickers, you have to wonder, like, okay, they're kicking at elevation, they're kicking at Colorado State or, wherever, and maybe that kind of inflates their numbers. But this guy's at Hawaii, so doesn't really necessarily have that same advantage, except for when he goes on the road, of course. But I think that the additions have been solid. I'm not quite. I mean, I know Xavier Sorey was a 5-star recruit and everything. And everyone remembers like, oh well, Drew Sanders didn't play a ton at Alabama, and he came here and was an All-American. Not everybody's Drew Sanders. I would like to see what Sorey looks like in spring ball. Hopefully, we get a good look at him and can develop some opinions. But that's kind of like, to me, is maybe the biggest question mark. Is linebacker is an area they have to address with as many departures as they've had.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of potential in this transfer portal class. And that might be putting it kindly, honestly, because like a great example is Jordan Anthony. Yesterday, Arkansas picked up a commitment from Jordan Anthony, a wide receiver out of Texas A&M. He's fast, apparently. That's what everybody keeps telling me. He's going to run track for Arkansas. Probably a good sign he actually is fast. He didn't really have any. He hasn't put up any numbers in the SEC. I think he started at Kentucky. Am I right with that, Hutch? Yep. He started at Kentucky before getting to TAMU. And, I think he's got 4 college football catches in his career, something like that. And it's great that he's fast. And, that wide receiver room needed some speed. I think Satania is really the only, true burner in that wide receiver room. So it fits into what they need, but it's not guaranteed production. When you look at what Ole Miss is bringing in through the transfer portal, which is just ridiculous and crazy, but they're bringing in guys who have produced in the SEC. Arkansas has a couple. The defensive back from Tennessee, Danico Slaughter, I think is he played a lot of snaps for Tennessee. That the lineman from Tennessee, Addison Nichols, played a lot of snaps. So that's a couple. But like the Sorey point that you brought up about, he hasn't really gotten much playing time at Georgia. Yes, he's a 5-star recruit. There's a lot of guys that are coming in here that you look at some of their bio and you're like, wow, great pickup. And then you look at what they've done in their college careers and it's like, ooh, are these Arkansas coaches going to be able to extract that potential out of them? I don't know. I think it's Bobby Petrino's a better offensive coordinator than Dan Enos. So at least we have that hope in the back of our minds. I will say the one thing that I've been the most happy with about the Arkansas transfer portal so far is they brought in 3 offensive linemen, I believe, and Devin Manuel's gone. But that's really it, right? That's the only offensive lineman that transferred out, which I know the offensive line was really bad last year. But it would have been unwise or unfortunate to bring in talent and then see guys leave, because you need that competition. And you need, in the SEC, if you need 7 linemen, injuries happen, right? Maybe guys don't turn out well or pan out the way you thought they would. I'm happy, Kudus is staying, Braun is staying. They're now starting to kind of stack guys on that offensive line, and there's going to be really meaningful competition across a lot of spots. That's something the offensive line didn't have last year. Outside of left tackle, we all knew who the other 4 spots, the starters, were going to be. And when those other 4 guys didn't live up to their billing and the offensive line struggled, there was no obvious answers to slide in and try and get some life into that position group. So I am, like you said about Carmona, Blackstone from Michigan State, like these guys, maybe, but I am happy that they're stacking a little bit of talent at that position group, because that's got to be the number one focus for Pitman, for Petrino, for everybody in Arkansas. Is that offensive line has to be at least average next year. It was one of the worst in the country in 2023. It has to be at least average. What do you think of Taylon Green? Have you done much research on him? He seems like probably QB1, but Jacoby Criswell is going to have a say about that. And looking forward to a quarterback competition. What do you make of the guys that are currently on the roster and Taylon specifically?
Taylon, when he committed, I really dove into like why did he have regression this year? Because he was really good in 2022, was a freshman All-American, had all these accolades, and then it just didn't work out this year. I mean, he got benched at one point. He was splitting reps with the guy, and what I found was that there was a change in offensive coordinator. He had basically an interim offensive coordinator last year in 2022, and it was Dirk Cutter. That's a name people might recognize as football. Guy that's been around football for a long time, had time in the NFL, and he really flourished under him. And then they brought in a different guy, a guy that I honestly had never heard of before, and it just didn't work out well. And I think early on they decided, hey, we're going to give this other guy, this young guy, some reps. They started to do a 2-quarterback system, and unless you've got Chris Leak and Tim Tebow, 2-quarterback systems typically don't work very well. And I think that's what we saw there at Boise State. That's what we saw at Arkansas a few years ago with Nick Starkel and Ben Hicks, and we saw regression this year with KJ Jefferson under a new offensive coordinator. So it's not a unique situation. So that's why I'm a little bit more optimistic than maybe some Arkansas fans were, who just looked at his stat line and were like, oh wow, he was so much worse this year. Why are we bringing him in? Well, there was a lot of circumstances going on there. The coach got fired at one point. He did end the year on a high note, winning the Mountain West Championship, beating Barry Odom and them at UNLV. I think that he's going to be solid. I do think it's going to be an open competition between him and Jacoby Criswell. I know there's some people that think Malachi Singleton could make a push. He was a 4-star recruit, heralded guy. Based on the limited time we got to see him really in the spring, I think he's got potential, but I would not be banking on him being your starting quarterback when Sam Pittman's trying to save his job. So I think it's going to be a Taylon Green, Jacoby Criswell battle for QB1. And with Green being the handpicked guy from Bobby Petrino, being a guy that Petrino recruited out of high school when he was at Missouri State, I think that kind of tells you that he's probably got the edge, but wouldn't write off the Arkansas kid just yet.
Yeah, I really liked what I saw from Malachi in fall. Again, very limited viewing. But I think you bring up a great point. I don't think Pittman's riding with a redshirt freshman during this incredibly important season. And I think it's going to be an open competition. But look, Petrino didn't bring in Criswell, right? Petrino didn't bring in Malachi. He kind of brought in KJ Jackson, the freshman that's signed to the 2024 class. In the sense, I think Petrino got the job and he was already committed. And from all accounts, Petrino loved what he saw on film and wanted to make sure that that commitment held under a new offensive coordinator. But Taylon Green is Petrino's guy. They went out and they got their quarterback transfer portal position solved before KJ Jefferson was even out the door. And I know KJ was likely leaving all along, Jefferson that is, but they saw a person that they thought fit their system, and they went out and got him right away. And there's a lot of places out there right now that still don't have a transfer, a quarterback through the portal, and they desperately need one. So I think that's a pretty good sign at like what Petrino is going to lean towards. But hey, if once they get on the practice fields, if Jacoby Criswell is clearly the better quarterback, like we've talked about, Pitman is not going to shy away from playing the best guy in this very, very important season. Real quick, Hutch, who do you think is the biggest addition and then the biggest loss through the transfer portal right now?
Let me see. I'm going to start with the biggest loss, because I'm so negative and everything. I would say I think it's probably Poop Hall, because I think he was a guy that he
Mm.
didn't have the season I expected him to have, uh, but he was still a guy that if he lived up to his potential, and I think if he had another year in the system and everything, everyone meshed well and everything, then I think he has the potential to be an All SEC linebacker, and he may very well be at Ole Miss. So I think that's probably the biggest loss in my opinion. I know you can make a case for Rocket and KJ. That's kind of the easy answer, but I'm going to go with Pooh on that thing. Biggest addition, man. I mean, you'd almost have to say Taylor Green. I know that's the easy answer, but
Yeah.
because of the new offensive coordinator Bobby Petrino, because of what we've seen Taylor Green's potential as a young guy. I mean, he's 6'6", can run. I think there's a lot to be excited about with him. And I mentioned the kicker. I think is maybe the most underrated addition, Matthew Shipley. But I think Taylor Green's probably the biggest addition right now in terms of what he's already done and what he can do, in this new situation.
Yeah, I'm going to take the easy way out, but I'm not going to go KJ Jefferson. I'm going to say Rocket. I was super bummed. I was so excited to kind of watch him this season in person. When I got this job, I started kind of like rewatching some Arkansas games and trying to do research, and I was just blown away by he was such a complete running back. During his sophomore season, the speed, the power, the pass catching ability. And look, this year, for a variety of reasons, it just didn't go well. He was injured for most of the season. The team stunk, which probably diminished his motivation coming back from injury. This is just a normal human reaction. The offensive line was, he was getting hit in the backfield almost 80% of the plays. I think the writing was probably on the wall just with how bad they were, and he needed a fresh start. But the fact that he didn't go play pro, the fact that he's coming back to college for his senior season, which, running back's a position that gets a lot of wear and tear. You see these guys kind of leave early for the NFL a lot to start those careers early. It would have been really nice to kind of hang on to him. And man, him and Gustav would have been a great 1-2 punch kind of going into next season. But alas, he's gone. It's South Carolina, and I think Arkansas is gonna really miss him next year. Biggest additions, I'll make this super quick. I just think it's all the offensive linemen. Just bring them all. Bring 10 guys in, and hope that 3 or 4 hit. Right now they've got 3 committed, and I think they maybe even need 1 more just to build numbers and to build competition along that front. So, last football-related question. What do you think, Hutch, are the minimum requirements for Sam Pitman to keep his job in 2024? Because I think we might disagree on this one. I'm interested to see what you think. Like, how many wins does he need to kind of keep his job?
Game. I really do. Could he save his job with a 5-win season? I mean, perhaps, but I mean, at that point, you're just what message are you sending the fans if you're Hunter Yurachek? 6 wins probably isn't enough to excite the fan base or instill much confidence, but you could at least say, hey, it's improvement. They took a step back, but now they're taking a step back forward. So I think 6 wins is probably the minimum. But even then, I'm not 100% sure. It just kind of depends on how the 6 wins are. I mean, are the 6 losses all blowouts? Are they getting beat by 21, 28 points each game, or are they competitive, close losses while also winning some of those close games, unlike they did this past year?
Dang, I thought you were going to go a little higher than that. So we're kind of on the same page. I think 6-7 wins is what needs to, I kind of think 7, honestly, just because you look at that schedule, there are 6 wins on the schedule. There should be at least, I mean, you should get at least 3. I don't know the schedule. At least 3 from the non-conference slate, right? And, I don't know. I'm blanking out on their schedule a little bit right now, but I think that you can find 6 wins on that schedule, and then it's a matter of, hey, can you win a game maybe you're not supposed to, upset a team, which I feel like typically that happens in the SEC, right? And that just did not happen for Arkansas this year, other than beating Florida, the Gators didn't make a bowl game either. Everyone loved that win at the time, and in retrospect, it was not really a great victory. So. All right, let's move on. We're almost done. We got What the Hog. This is going to be a weekly segment where I share the craziest thing I've seen from Arkansas Twitter each week. As an outsider, Hutch, I think I don't get nearly as high or as low as some of the fans and maybe even some of the other reporters around the program. I'm not going to share what I'm bringing to this segment with you, so we can all get your natural reaction. Listeners, feel free to DM either of us on Twitter for some nominees. We'll drop our Twitter handles or our X handles, excuse me, at the end of the podcast. This week's a little tame. I'm not gonna lie. Winter break. I think maybe everyone calmed down a little bit, happy over Christmas time. But without further ado, What the Hog? What is going on with Arkansas fans freaking out about players transferring to SEC schools? Have you had a look at your own roster? I mean, your best player is from LSU and Landon Jackson, right? Like Dwight McGlothern also from LSU. You just picked up two guys from Tennessee and another from Georgia. I think you've written about this, Hutch, so I think I could predict your answer, but like what is going on there? Is there no like self-reflection at all about just your own roster and what the current state of college football is right now?
I really saw it whenever Pooh Paul committed to Ole Miss. People just lost their minds, like, oh my gosh, it's a division rival, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, well, first of all, divisions are no more. There's no more divisions. Yeah, it's Ole Miss. It's a rival, whatever. But, yeah, I mean, you got guys from LSU. You mentioned those two. I mean, you get guys from Missouri all the time. I mean, Trajan Jeffcoat was from Missouri. Trey Williams a couple years ago was from Missouri. Markel Etzy from Missouri. You've got guys, I mean, Drew Sanders was from Alabama, and people love that guy because he was incredible. He was an incredible player for the Razorbacks. I think this is just one of those situations where it benefits everybody. You're going to get some good guys. You're going to lose some good guys. I think the key is just to try to get good guys to replace the ones you lose. And whether they go to SEC schools or not, who cares? I mean, that at least tells you that, hey, these guys were pretty good, and that probably means they had success for you while they were here in your program. And, I'd rather them to go to SEC schools than go down to, we've seen plenty of guys transfer to Grambling and Southern and Abilene Christian and things like that. Well, that's not really good because that means you had FCS players on your SEC roster. So to me, it should be a compliment. Like, hey, these are good players. Your roster is good. You obviously want to keep them, but if you're going to lose them, they seeing them to go to good schools kind of tells you, okay, we're on the right track. Our coaches are making good evaluations and things like that. That's how I would take it, at least.
Yeah, I agree. And it's not just the football program here at Arkansas. Trevon Brazile from Missouri. I know the baseball teams picked up quite a few transfers from Missouri and other SEC schools. I was like, what? Like, how can we like be so angry? And then like just one click on the Arkansas roster, you're going to see a lot of high school / SEC school. And it's especially next year with the guys, bringing in Nichols and Sorey and Slaughter and, those SEC guys. So, all right, What the Hog, it'll get a little juicier, I think, from here on out. I'm going to, this was I thought about this segment like right before we decided this podcast. I'm going to keep an eye out a little bit more for things that we can bring to that segment. So that's it. Fun first episode, Hutch. Really appreciate you joining me today. And from here on out, tell the listeners again where they can find you on social media.
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter.
Read your work.
I still call it Twitter. I know it's X, whatever. NWA Hutch. It's my handle. I've been on there forever, so you can follow me on there. And, of course, all my work at bestofarkansassports.com. We've also got a Twitter account, Best of AR Sports on Twitter. I think we're also on Instagram maybe too. I'm not 100% sure on that. So you can find us there, and, of course, on Facebook as well, Best of Arkansas Sports. Go check it all out. All of our content goes on there. And as I said earlier, 100% free.
Awesome. And you can find me on Twitter at JacksonFuller16. Read all of our stuff at swtimes.com. I'm really looking forward to the conference basketball season getting underway. Duke and even the UNC Wilmington game, Bud Walton Arena was jumping a little bit. So hopefully we get that same environment this Saturday for Auburn. We will be back with our second episode on Monday, January 8th, recapping the Auburn game, which, as we discussed, feels kind of like a massive game for the Hogs. We'll probably throw this in there at the end of multiple podcasts as we get going. But if there are any interested businesses or anyone in sponsoring this podcast, or if you want to get involved in any way, just please reach out to us on Twitter at the handles we just provided you. So until then, everyone have a great start to 2024.